Hello and welcome, I'm King Gaudi from Saxophone Comprehensive, and in this video we will explore some ways of using the whole tone scale to improvise over a 2-5-1 progression. The whole tone scale, as the name suggests, is a scale made up entirely of whole tone intervals. That is, every note in the scale is a whole tone away from the note before it and the note after it. This results in a symmetrical scale of only 6 notes. Here we have the C whole tone scale. The interesting thing is if we create the scale of whole tone intervals on any of the other notes of this scale, we will still produce the same whole tone scale. The only difference is that it will start on a different note, but it would contain all of the same notes of the scale. And as such, there are only 2 whole tone scales, this one and the other one that starts on any note not in this scale. Here we have the other whole tone scale. If we look a little closer at the scale, we will see that any triad created from the scale will produce an augmented triad. We can also form the augmented 7th chords since the flattened 7th note is also in the scale. This means that the scale can be used to play over augmented triads and augmented 7th chords. It also has the root, the 3rd and the flattened 7th of any dominant chords. So again, this means that the whole tone scale can be used when improvising over any dominant 7th chord, especially if that chord has a sharpened 5th, a 9th or sharpened 11th extension. If the dominant chord does not have these extensions, then the scale may be used to bring out these extensions. Since the scale is symmetrical, any lick created can be played over any of the chords created from the same scale. The scale can also be played over minor chords. Usually the whole tone scale, a half tone below the chord would be used. For example, the B whole tone scale will be played over the C minor 7th chord. This can be used as a substitute for the Dorian scale, harmonic or melodic minor scale. There are other places where the scale can be used, but for the beginner, it's best to restrict it to the dominant chord in a 2-5-1 progression and to use it occasionally since it has an unusual sound quality to it. To become familiar with the scale, it can be played as patterns ascending and descending the scale in the same manner as other scales are played. Here are a few short examples of patterns which can be used ascending and descending. Now let's see this at work in a 2-5-1 progression. Here we have a typical melody over a 2-5-1 progression in the key of C. We could improvise over it using the notes of the C major scale or use the appropriate pentatonic scale. You can see my video on improvising using the pentatonic scale for further information. But here what we would do is to take out this section played over the dominant chord and replace it with something created from the whole tone scale. We will leave the last section, but usually this would be adapted to create a smooth melody. Starting on a note in the G whole tone scale that is close to the ending note of the first section, we can use a scale pattern or continue the melody using the notes of the whole tone scale. Here I have replaced the section over the dominant chord with a few scale patterns discussed previously. By using the whole tone scale over the dominant chord occasionally, we can add some tension and interest to our melody. So once again, the reason why it works is because the G whole tone scale has the main notes of the G7th chord, the dominant chord. It has the guide tones, the 3rd and the 7th note, that is the B and the F. It also has the root note, which is the G. It doesn't have the fifth note, which would have been the D, but it has a sharpened fifth, which would be the D sharp. But because it has these main notes of the chord, the root, the third and the seventh note of the chord, you can actually use the G whole tone scale over this dominant chord. Now, the more patterns that you learn, the more creative you can actually be in your improvisation. Now, I know that playing scales can be quite boring, especially if you have to play them in thirds and fourths or interrupted scales or have the notes displaced or accented. It can be quite boring, but in the long term, it will actually help you in your improvisation. The more patterns you learn, the more creative you can be when creating your melody. Charlie Parker once said this, and what I take from that is that you learn the basics. So you learn the scales, you learn the guide tones, you learn the chord tones, you learn how to play with these patterns. Then once you've learned it to such an extent that it becomes a part of you, you don't really need to rely on this music theory anymore. You're actually at that stage where you can actually play, where you can actually hear in your head. And so that's what I take from that particular quote. Well, let me say thank you for watching this video, and if you're not yet a subscriber, then consider subscribing to this channel and hit that notification bell so that you are notified every time I upload a new video. I will upload some more videos on improvisation shortly, so stay tuned. And I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.